The morning light filtered through the cracks in the window, creating a pattern of shadows and brightness on the packed earth floor of my room. I had always loved this soft lighting that filled the air with a sense of calm and hope. I woke up early, as usual, and the smell of my grandmother's cooked rice spread throughout the house, awakening not only my appetite, but also a series of thoughts that danced in my mind. It was a new day, but the same search for answers still accompanied me. I got out of bed and looked around, observing the simple walls of my small room. The philosophy books were stacked on an improvised shelf, and others, more worn, were scattered across the table. Each of them contained a fragment of my thoughts, an attempt to understand the world and the place I occupied in it. I was known in the village as the thinking boy, and this nickname, though affectionate, carried a weight that I bore with a mix of pride and anxiety. I walked down the stairs where my grandmother was already up, stirring a steaming pot. Seeing me, she smiled, revealing her wrinkles which told stories of love and sacrifice. "Good morning, Liang. You're up early today. What were you dreaming about, my son?" She always knew that I spent my nights immersed in deep thoughts. "Good morning, Grandma. I was thinking about life, as always," I replied, sitting at the table. The aroma of rice and jasmine tea was comforting. "Do you remember the story you told me about the old sage who sought the truth in dreams?" She paused for a moment, her eyes lighting up with the memory. "Ah, yes. He used nails to seek clarity. He believed that by placing nails under his pillow, he could receive answers during the night. Would you like to try that too?" I felt a wave of curiosity forming inside me. Maybe. But does it really work, Grandma? I have so many questions, and sometimes I feel lost. Sometimes, my dear, the answers don't come immediately. But if you are willing to seek, you may find what you're looking for. The mind is a powerful place, and wisdom can reveal itself in unexpected ways. After breakfast, I decided to go to school. The path to the classroom was familiar, filled with trees and flowers that seemed to dance in the wind. I was excited and a little anxious for today's lesson. Teacher Chen was a wise man, always prompting us to think more deeply about Buddhist teachings. He had the gift of making complex ideas accessible and intriguing. When I entered the classroom, I saw my classmates were already settling in. May, my childhood friend, was sitting in the front row, her black hair softly falling over her shoulders. She always made me nervous. There was something about her smile that made my heart race. But for now, I focused on the lesson. Teacher Chen entered and greeted us. Today, we're going to talk about the search for truth and how we can find it within ourselves. Often, we get distracted by external things and forget to look inside. He paused, allowing his words to settle. An ancient teaching suggests that by placing nails under our pillows, we can clarify our minds and receive answers while we sleep. The room fell silent as we absorbed his words. I was intrigued. "Teacher, does that really work?" I asked, my curiosity taking over. He smiled as if he had been expecting that question. "There's no guarantee you'll receive clear answers, but it's a practice many have found valuable. What matters is the intention with which you approach it. Asking is the first step to understanding." My thoughts raced. The idea of using nails to seek answers was strange, but at the same time, fascinating. What did I have to lose? With this idea bubbling in my mind, the rest of the lesson passed in a blur, and I could barely focus on the teachings. My heart raced with the possibility of discovering something new about myself. By the end of the lesson, I decided I needed to try the practice with the nails. The walk back home was filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. The image of the nails under the pillow replayed in my mind like a mantra. What was I seeking? Wisdom, clarity, or simply a way to better understand my feelings, especially regarding May? When I got home, I found my grandmother sitting on the porch, embroidering a tablecloth. "You look thoughtful, Liang. What's going on?" she asked, looking up at me. "Grandma, about what you mentioned this morning. I want to try putting nails under my pillow tonight. The teacher talked about it, and I think it might help me." She smiled with understanding. "If that's your decision, my son, do it with faith. Remember that what you seek must come from a pure place within you." With my grandmother's words echoing in my mind, I went to the backyard and looked for the nails we used to season the food. They were there, small and simple, but I saw in them a potential for something greater. After choosing them, I went back inside, where the sunlight was beginning to fade, giving way to night. As I prepared for sleep, I carefully placed the nails under my pillow. The act was simple but loaded with meaning. In the darkness, I closed my eyes, and instead of letting myself be carried away by anxiety, I sought to calm my mind. May answers come to me, I thought, and soon I was enveloped in a deep sleep. The night passed slowly, and my dreams began to intertwine with the longings and questions I held. As I immersed myself in this new experience, the hope of understanding myself and the world around me grew with each breath. The journey was just beginning, and I was ready to discover what the Cloves could reveal to me. That night, I could hardly sleep. The pillow felt heavier than usual, perhaps because of the anticipation I felt regarding what the Cloves might bring me. I closed my eyes, thinking about what I hoped to find. As soon as I fell asleep, I was transported to a place that seemed to be beyond this world. I was in a vast field, filled with wildflowers that danced gently in the wind. The sunlight filtered through the trees, creating a spectacle of shadows and light that made the environment even more enchanting. And there, sitting under a leafy tree, was he, a sage in long robes, with a serene smile that radiated peace. I didn't know how, but I recognized that man as someone who had much to teach. "Welcome, young one," he said, his voice soft as a whisper of the wind. "You came in search of answers, didn't you?" I nodded, feeling a mix of nervousness and curiosity. "Yes, I put Cloves under my pillow, and I hope you can help me understand what I should do with my feelings." The sage smiled with understanding. "Ah, feelings. They are like the sea, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy. Love and pain, my young friend, go hand in hand. You must learn to accept both, for they are essential for your growth." "But how can I accept the pain?" I asked, feeling a knot in my stomach. "Sometimes it feels unbearable. Understand that pain is a teacher. It teaches the value of love. Without pain, you wouldn't know how to appreciate the joy that love brings. When you allow yourself to feel the pain, you also open yourself to the depth of love." I reflected on his words. It was true that in moments of sadness, I had learned a lot about myself, but the idea of accepting pain seemed daunting. But what if I get hurt too much? What if I lose the people I love? "The fear of losing is a prison you create for yourself," the sage replied. "You need to free yourself from this fear. True love is not possessive, it is free. And when you truly love, even in pain, there is growth." I looked at the field around me and realized that everything there was interconnected: flowers, trees, sky, and me. A wave of calm began to wash over me. "And what should I do now?" I asked, feeling a bit more confident. "Live fully. Don't be afraid to open up to others. Love is a risk, but it is worth it. And remember, every experience, whether good or bad, is an opportunity to learn." The sage's words echoed in my mind as the scene began to dissolve. I was being pulled back to reality, but not before hearing his last phrase: "The clarity you seek is within you. Trust your heart." I woke up with the sun shining through the window, illuminating the room. The dream was still fresh in my mind. With the sage's teachings echoing in my heart, I decided that I could no longer ignore my feelings for May. It was time to open up to her, to be honest about what I felt. I got up and prepared for the day. The smell of coffee my grandmother was brewing filled the air, and I sat at the table trying to organize my thoughts. "Liang, you seem thoughtful today," she commented, placing a bowl of rice in front of me. "Yes, Grandma. I had a very interesting dream last night," I replied, stirring the food on my plate, "about love and pain." She smiled, as if she knew exactly what I was talking about. Ah, dreams can be powerful. They often show us what is inside us. I feel like I need to be more open with the people I love, especially with May, I confessed, but I'm afraid of how she might react. Fear is something we all face, my dear. But you will never know the answer if you don't try, she said, with a look of wisdom in her eyes. Be sincere. True love deserves to be expressed. Those words encouraged me. After breakfast, I decided that I would look for May. I walked through the village, my heart racing in my chest. Each step I took seemed to bring me closer to the truth I needed to share. When I arrived at May's house, I found her in the yard, tending to some plants. The sun shone in her hair, and for a moment, I hesitated. She was so beautiful, and the idea of opening my heart to her felt terrifying, but I remembered the words of the sage and my grandmother. I needed to be brave. "Hi, May!" I called, trying to sound casual, but my voice betrayed my nervousness. "Hi, Liang, it's great to see you." She smiled and my heart raced. "Want to help?" "Sure," I replied, moving closer. As we worked together, the conversation flowed naturally, but amid the laughter and teasing, I knew I needed to find the right moment. After some time, I decided that it was now or never. "May, can I tell you something?" I asked, feeling the weight of the words in my throat. "Of course, what is it?" She looked at me, her eyes curious. "It's about us," I started, but my voice faltered. The words were there, but I couldn't articulate them. Nervousness took over, and I lost myself in thought. "About us?" She seemed confused, and her expression made my heart sink. What was I doing? "Liang, are you okay?" "Yes, I am," I replied quickly, but I wasn't sure. I just wanted to say that. Then everything I had planned dissipated. What should have been a declaration of love turned into a jumble of words that made no sense. "I think that I like you, but I don't know how to say it because, or maybe." May frowned, and I realized I was making her even more confused. "Liang, you're saying you like me, right?" "Yes, but it's complicated. I don't want to ruin our friendship." I was so flustered that I almost laughed at myself. What was I expecting? That she would just understand everything? She sighed and her expression changed. "Liang, I didn't know you felt this way." There was a mix of surprise and hesitation in her voice. "I'm sorry if I confused you. I just wanted to be honest," I said, feeling shame wash over me. "I like you too, but I didn't know if you felt the same," she confessed. But her hesitation was evident. "I just don't know how this would work, you know." We looked at each other, and I realized that there was more between us than just friendship. But, at the same time, the fear of the unknown loomed over us. So I just smiled awkwardly, trying to hide my embarrassment. "Maybe we should talk more about this later." "Yes, that would be nice." "Let's see what happens," she replied, still a bit hesitant, but with a shy smile. With a mix of relief and confusion, I left May's house, knowing that I had taken an important step, but still unsure of where it would lead us. The weight of the nails I had placed under my pillow felt lighter now, and even though the future was uncertain, I was willing to face whatever came. The journey was just beginning, and I was ready to discover where love and pain would take me. Discouraged, I returned to the practice of the nails. The words of the wise still echoed in my mind, but insecurity and fear felt heavier each day. The idea that I needed to face the storm haunted me, and the truth was that I didn't know how. After a tiring day filled with doubts, I lay down, placing the nails under my pillow once again. The act, which had once seemed like mere superstition, now carried new weight. I was ready to seek more clarity, eager to understand what life was trying to teach me. That night, I plunged into a deep sleep, and just like the first time, a vivid dream took over my mind. The setting was a furious storm, with dark clouds covering the sky and lightning streaking through the air, briefly illuminating the landscape around me. I was in the middle of an open field, unprotected, feeling the force of nature in its rawest form. The wind blew with such intensity that it almost knocked me down. Fear tightened my chest as the rain began to fall, torrential and cold. "Why are you running?" A deep, calm voice cut through the noise of the storm. I looked around, and suddenly, the wise man I had encountered in my first dream appeared before me. He was calm, as if the storm did not affect him. "You cannot ignore the storm, Liang. It is part of you. But I'm scared." "What should I do?" I shouted, struggling against the wind that was trying to push me back. The wise man smiled, and his penetrating gaze seemed to pierce through the tumultuous scene. "Face it. The storm is a metaphor for your fears and insecurities. Only by facing them will you find the calm you seek." I looked at the storm, at the raindrops falling like arrows, and in a surge of determination, I decided to run toward the center of the fury. The wind howled in my ears, and the water soaked my clothes, but I did not hesitate. With each step, I felt the power of fear dissipating. The storm that once seemed terrifying was now just a phenomenon to observe. "That's right, Liang. Keep going. You are stronger than you think," the wise man exclaimed, encouraging me. And so, in the fury of the storm, a new strength began to blossom within me. I realized that facing my fears did not mean conquering them, but accepting them as part of me. The storm began to diminish. The wind, which had once pushed me, now became a gentle breeze. The dark clouds began to dissipate, revealing a clear and tranquil sky. I felt a profound peace invade my being, a sensation I had not experienced in a long time. The wise man approached and, with a gentle gesture, placed his hand on my shoulder. "Now you understand, don't you? The storm is temporary, but the calm is lasting. It is by facing your fears that you find true strength." He smiled, and I knew that his wisdom was taking root in me. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight streamed through the window, bathing my room in a warm glow. The memory of the dream still lingered in my mind, and a new determination took hold of me. I knew I needed to face my feelings for May more honestly. The storm that had calmed within me now encouraged me to act. After a quick coffee, I did some breathing exercises to calm my nerves. The day unfolded slowly, but in my mind, I could only think of May. What would I say to her? How could I express everything I felt? The words seemed to dance in my mind, but I needed to organize them into something coherent. It was then that I decided to seek her out. I walked to her house with my heart racing. The trees along the way seemed to whisper, as if they knew my mission. Upon arriving, I took a deep breath and knocked on the door. The wait felt endless, but soon May appeared, her smile lighting up the day. "Hi, Liang. What are you doing here?" she asked, a sparkle of curiosity in her eyes. "Hi, May. I wanted to talk to you," I replied, feeling a flutter in my stomach. She invited me in, and I nervously sat in one of the chairs in the living room. "What happened?" "You seem different," she observed, tilting her head slightly. I had a dream," I began, hesitant. A dream that made me realize I needed to be more honest with myself and with others, about how I feel, about us. She looked at me intently, and I continued, "I've always liked you, May, Since we were kids, I have always admired your strength and kindness, but I was afraid to talk about it, afraid of ruining our friendship." May remained silent, her eyes fixed on me, and I felt exposed as if I were in a storm again. But now I realize that facing this fear is necessary. I don't want to hide what I feel anymore. She hesitated, and I could see the internal struggle in her gaze. "Liang, I didn't know you felt this way. I have feelings for you too, but I was confused. I didn't want to risk our friendship, but we can find a way together, can't we? We can face this as friends, no matter what happens," I said, trying to convey my sincerity. May smiled shyly, but there was still a shadow of hesitation in her eyes. "I would like that, but it's complicated. I don't want this to change everything." "I understand," I replied, my heart tightening. "But sometimes changes are necessary. And I am willing to face this, to face any storm that comes, as long as we are together." She looked down, thoughtful, and the room fell silent. The tension was palpable, but I knew I had taken the first step. The internal storm I had feared so much had calmed, and now I hoped she could find her peace too. "I need to think more about this," May finally said, her voice soft. "But I really appreciate you for sharing your feelings. That means a lot to me." I nodded, understanding. Whatever happened, I knew I had faced my fears, and that in itself was a victory. And so I left May's house with a mix of hope and uncertainty, but lighter than before. The storm had passed, and the sun was beginning to shine again. The morning light filtered through the window, creating a gentle pattern on the earthen floor of my small house. The smell of jasmine tea that my grandmother was brewing in the kitchen mingled with the fresh aroma of freshly cut grass. I was still a bit dazed from the experiences of the previous nights, especially after the dreams that guided me through unknown paths of my mind. The wisdom I sought seemed to be getting further away, but at the same time, it was beginning to reveal itself in unexpected ways. I decided to go out and take a walk around the village. The sun was already high, and people were starting to move about, many of them with worried faces, as if they were carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders. I remembered how, the night before, I had dreamed of a wise man who spoke to me about the importance of helping others. With that in mind, I decided it was time to put into practice what I had learned. I walked to the house of a neighbor, Mr. Zhao, who always seemed to have a cloud of sadness hovering around him. He had lost his wife a few months ago, and since then, his life seemed marked by a deep silence. I knocked on the door and waited. After a few moments, he answered, looking at me with surprise. "Liang, what brings you here?" he asked, a shy smile blooming on his face. "Hello, Mr. Zhao. I was thinking about you. I wanted to see if I could help you with anything." My voice sounded more confident than I felt. He hesitated for a moment, as if pondering whether to open his heart to me. Finally, he sighed and gestured for me to come in. The room was dark, and the only light came from a small window where some wilted plants seemed to be crying out for water. "Please have a seat." He indicated a worn chair. "I don't know if there's much you can do, but I appreciate your visit." As he spoke, I noticed the framed photos adorning the walls. Most of them showed him next to his wife, both smiling happily in moments that seemed to have come straight out of a dream. I felt a wave of empathy for that man who was so trapped in the past. "Life can be tough sometimes, can't it?" I began, searching for the right words. "Sometimes we feel like everything is lost." He nodded, and his eyes filled with tears. "That's true, Liang. Loneliness is a heavy burden, but you, being so young, cannot fully understand." He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "Actually, I have been learning some things." I took a deep breath, remembering what the wise man had told me about love and pain. Recently, I've been trying to help others in the village, and that has brought me some clarity. I believe that by sharing our pains, we find a way to heal. Mr. Zhao looked at me with a curious expression. His sadness didn't disappear, but something in his face seemed lighter. "What do you have to say about love then?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I loved my wife more than anything, but now she is gone. How can I go on? Love never disappears, Mr. Zhao. It transforms." I tried to explain. The pain can be intense, but it can also teach us about the beauty that existed. Sometimes we need to allow pain to connect us to others instead of isolating ourselves. He was silent for a moment, absorbing my words. I felt that I was still learning to understand this myself, but the conversation seemed to touch something within him. "You are a wise boy, Liang. I think you can help more people than you realize," he finally said, a slight smile beginning to appear on his lips. I left Mr. Zhao's house with a heart a little lighter. I had felt useful, and that feeling was new and invigorating. I decided I would help more people in the village, even if it was just by listening to their stories. With each conversation, I felt I was gaining more wisdom, not only from my dreams, but also from real life. In the following days, I began to walk around the village, offering my support to anyone in need. I went to Mrs. Lin's house, who was sad over the absence of her husband, and spent hours listening to her memories. I visited the young Wang, who was distressed about not knowing how to support his family. What I perceived was that by helping others, I was also healing parts of myself that were wounded. The connection with people brought me a new perspective on life and love. However, even while engaging with the villagers, May's image would not leave my mind. I found myself thinking of her during conversations, imagining how she would react to each situation I witnessed. The longing for her presence grew stronger each day, and the uncertainty about her feelings for me left me restless. It was as if there were a storm inside me, a mix of hope and fear. One night, after a day full of meaningful interactions, I sat by the river that ran through the village. The water flowed serenely, and the stars began to shine in the sky. I felt the need to place the nails under my pillow once again, hoping that the wisdom I sought there would help me understand what to do about May. As I prepared to sleep, the image of her laughter echoed in my mind, along with the memories of our moments together in childhood. The pain of not knowing if she felt anything for me as well was like a weight that followed me. I placed the nails under the pillow and closed my eyes, allowing my thoughts to slowly dissipate. In the darkness, I let my mind flow, surrendering to sleep. That night, I dreamed again of the wise man. He was sitting under a leafy tree, and sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a golden pattern around him. He looked at me with a serene smile. "Liang, you have become a source of light for others. But do not forget that the light also needs to shine within you." His voice was soft yet firm. I can't stop thinking about May, I confessed, feeling the weight of vulnerability. "Love is a powerful force, but you must learn to let go of what you cannot control," he replied, looking toward the horizon. "Unrequited desire can hurt, but it is also an opportunity to grow." "So what should I do?" I asked, wishing for a clear and direct answer. "Love yourself, Liang, and let love flow without expectations." He got up and began to walk away, disappearing into the sunlight. I woke up with those words echoing in my mind. What the wise man had said resonated deeply. I realized that while I sought love and acceptance from May, I had neglected the importance of loving myself first. This new understanding brought relief, as if an internal storm was beginning to calm. With a lighter heart, I decided that regardless of what happened with May, I would continue helping the villagers, and most importantly, learning to understand myself. Life, after all, was not just about seeking answers, but also about accepting what is offered to us and learning from each experience. As I walked back home, the morning light illuminated my path, and I realized that the true wisdom I sought was beginning to form within me. That night, as I placed the nails under my pillow, I felt a weight in my heart. The old man's words echoed in my mind, like a mantra repeating itself in search of meaning. "Let go of what you cannot control," he had said. What did that really mean for me? The love for May, which seemed so strong and real, was something I could let go of. The idea of letting go made me restless, but also relieved. The frustration of loving someone who might not feel the same for me was a heavy burden. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. The room was enveloped in a soft twilight, the shadows dancing on the walls in the moonlight streaming through the window. With each breath, I tried to detach from the thoughts surrounding me. "Accept what life has in store for me," I repeated to myself, like a mantra that could guide me through the darkness. When I finally fell asleep, I plunged into a deep dream. The scene changed quickly, and I found myself once again in front of the wise man. He was sitting under a leafy tree, sunlight filtering between the leaves. The air was fresh, and the atmosphere was filled with tranquility. The wise man looked at me with a serene smile, and I immediately felt comfortable in his presence. "Liang," he began, his voice soft and deep, "you seek answers for your heart, but true happiness is not found in seeking validation from others' feelings. It is within you." I looked at him, confused. But how can I be happy knowing that the love I feel for May may never be reciprocated? I asked, feeling a pang of pain at the mention of her name. The wise man tilted his head, as if pondering my words. "Love is a powerful force, but it is also an invitation to self-discovery. When you place your expectations on others, you risk losing yourself in your insecurities. Letting go of those expectations is the first step to finding true happiness." "How do I do that?" My voice came out almost in a whisper, full of desperation. "Observe your heart, Liang. What does it truly desire? It is not May's validation, but the freedom to love without attachments. When you allow yourself to love, even if you do not receive the same love in return, you become stronger. Love should flow freely, just like the wind passing through the trees. Do not bind it to a single person." His words resonated within me and began to untie the knot I didn't realize I had in my chest. So I should just accept that love may not be reciprocated and move on. Yes, but that does not mean you should not love. Love, but love yourself first. When you love yourself, love for others becomes an extension of what already exists within you. I woke up with those words echoing in my mind. The sun was already rising, illuminating the room with a golden light. The doubts that consumed me seemed a little more distant. I felt a lightness that I hadn't felt in a long time. Life, with all its complexities, seemed a bit simpler. That morning, as I prepared for the day, I thought of May. The idea of loving her without expecting anything in return was liberating. I needed to focus on how I felt instead of worrying about what she might feel. Instead of anguishing, I would choose to be grateful for the moments we shared. I decided that rather than closing myself off, I should open my heart to new possibilities. My love for May would always be a part of me, but I wouldn't let it define my worth or my happiness. When I arrived at school, I found May sitting in our usual spot, laughing with some friends. As I approached, I felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Hi, Liang," she greeted me with a smile that brightened my day. "Hi, May," I replied, trying to hide my anxiety. "Did you have fun at the Lantern Festival yesterday?" "Oh, it was wonderful. The lanterns were so beautiful at night," she replied, her eyes sparkling. "And you? How was your night?" "It was interesting," I said, hesitating. What could I share without sounding strange? "I've been thinking about some things." She looked at me curiously. "About what? Philosophy, as always?" "Yeah, something like that," I replied, laughing nervously. "Actually, I've been thinking about love and how sometimes it can be complicated. May furrowed her brow, as if trying to understand what I meant. Complicated how? I realized that sometimes we get caught up in expectations we create about people, I said, searching for the right words. I think what's important is to love without expecting anything in return, to let our feelings flow. She watched me closely, and for a moment, silence took over. My heart raced in my chest, and I didn't know what to expect. Finally, May broke the silence. Are you saying this because of someone special? I hesitated, the weight of the truth almost suffocating me. Yeah, maybe. I just don't want to get carried away by something I can't control. May smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes that made me uneasy. Liang, you're one of the most sensitive people I know. Your heart is big, and I admire that. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what happens, I said, feeling a wave of sincerity. Life is full of uncertainties, but that doesn't mean we can't enjoy the moments we have. She nodded, and for a brief moment, our eyes met, as if a silent understanding was shared between us. I felt that there was something more there, something that could be explored, but at the same time, the freedom I had found within me told me not to force things. Thank you, Liang, she finally said with a gentle smile. You always know what to say. I really appreciate your friendship. The conversation flowed to other topics, but the feeling of lightness and acceptance remained. I had learned something important that night from the wise. Love was a journey, not a destination. And with this new understanding, I was ready to face whatever life had in store for me, with or without May by my side. That morning, when the sun began to illuminate the small village, a sense of renewal flooded my being. I had decided that rather than clinging to expectations regarding May, I would focus on my own journey of self-discovery. Life, I realized, was a series of experiences that we should embrace, even if they led us down unexpected paths. I got out of bed, the cloves still under the pillow, and went to the window. The fresh morning air filled my room, bringing with it the scent of the blooming fields. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling each particle of air fill my soul with a new hope. Today is a new day, I murmured to myself, and the determination to seek happiness within me resonated in every word. After getting dressed, I went to the kitchen, where the aroma of rice porridge prepared by my grandmother filled the air. She was there, standing, stirring the pot with an expression of serenity that always made me feel at home. Good morning, my dear, she said, without taking her eyes off the pot. You look radiant today. What happened? Good morning, Grandma, I replied with a smile I couldn't contain. I think I'm starting to understand some things about myself and what I really want. She turned to me, her eyes shining with curiosity. And what would that be, my child? I want to free myself from my expectations regarding May and focus more on myself, on my journey. Life is full of surprises, isn't it? I spoke with a sincerity that surprised me, as if each word brought clarity to my heart. Yes, life is full of surprises, my grandmother said with a gentle smile. But know that love, when true, always finds a way. Her words echoed in me as I had my breakfast. Her wisdom had always been a guide, even when I was lost in my uncertainties. After the meal, I decided to take a walk around the village. The sun was shining brightly, and the colors of nature were vibrant, as if the world was inviting me to join its dance. I walked along the dirt streets, greeting neighbors and absorbing the energy of life around me. The feeling of freedom enveloped me, and I felt like I was reconnecting with the essence of what it means to live. It was when, passing through the small square of the village, I spotted May sitting on a bench, a book open in her hands. My heart raced. The image of her, so focused on reading, brought forth a mix of emotions that I had tried to bury. I decided to approach her, not with the intention of declaring my love, but simply to connect as friends. "Hi, May," I called with a genuine smile. She looked up, and a smile lit up her face. "Hi, Liang. You look happy today." "I'm trying to feel that way," I replied, sitting down next to her. "What are you reading?" "It's a book about philosophy," she said, extending the work in my direction. "It talks about finding inner peace and how true happiness comes from within. These pages have been helping me reflect on some things in my life." My eyes lit up upon hearing her words. "That's interesting. I'm on that journey of self-discovery too. Sometimes I feel like we lose ourselves trying to seek validation from others." She nodded, thoughtful. "Yes, I feel that way too. Sometimes it seems like we are fighting against our own desires and expectations. It's a constant battle," I agreed. "But I think the key is learning to let go of what we can't control." May looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "You seem to have found clarity, Liang. That's inspiring." "Actually, I'm just beginning," I confessed. "But I'm willing to allow myself to feel, without fear of what it might bring." Our dialogue flowed naturally, as if we had been talking this way our whole lives. Time passed and I almost lost track of it. But deep down, there was a voice inside me saying that there was still something more to be revealed. When I finally said goodbye to May, a feeling of anticipation washed over me. There was something in her gaze that made me feel like the conversation wasn't over, but had somehow transformed into a bridge to an uncertain future, yet full of possibilities. That night I returned home with a mix of emotions, but one thing was clear. I was ready to face whatever came my way. As I prepared to sleep, I picked up the cloves that were still under my pillow. Their touch brought a sense of connection to the wisdom I was seeking. I put them back, but this time it was not just a practice, it was a ritual of surrender, of opening up to what the universe had to offer me. As I closed my eyes, I let my thoughts flow like a river finding its way, and soon the darkness transformed into light. I was back in my vivid dream, and the wise man appeared again, with his deep and serene gaze. "Liang," he said, "you have freed yourself from the shackles of desire, but are you prepared to understand the truth about love?" "Yes," I replied, determined. "I'm ready." "Then listen, for the wisdom you seek is not just in your experiences, but in the connections you make. Love is a journey, and true clarity comes when you allow your heart to open, even in the face of uncertainty." When I woke up, the morning light was already streaming through the window. My heart was pulsing with new energy. But as I got up, something caught my attention. A small letter was resting on the table next to my bed. It was from May. With trembling hands, I opened the letter and began to read. "Liang, I hope you don't mind, but I needed to write this. I have always admired your quest for wisdom and self-knowledge. I was confused about my feelings and hesitated to open up to you. But now, after our conversation, I realize that I can no longer remain silent about how I feel. You are special to me, and I would like to explore this together if you are willing to. With affection, May." As I read, my heart raced. It was as if all the pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place. The love I had longed to experience was right there before me. But at the same time, a new understanding emerged in my mind. Love was not an answer, but a continuous journey of discovery, and I was about to embark on that journey. However, there was something more that still needed to be revealed. As I looked at the cloves I had placed under my pillow, a memory of my grandmother came to mind. She had always talked about the connection with the spirits of our ancestors and how the cloves were a symbol of that bond. With a new understanding, I realized that those cloves were not just an external practice, but a link to my family's history. They symbolized the wisdom that had always been within me, a legacy I carried. In that moment, I understood that my quest for clarity and love was not just about finding answers, but about accepting the complexity of life and the intertwining of experiences. Love and wisdom were interconnected, and my journey was just beginning. Now let's take a brief reflection. Often we seek answers in the external world, but true clarity comes from within us. Liang's story teaches us that by facing our fears and letting go of expectations, we can find peace and true love. Just as the cloves under the pillow helped Liang discover more about himself, we too can use our experiences as tools for self-knowledge. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and share in the comments what you learned from it. What was the lesson that touched you the most? Feel free to tell us. Stay tuned for the next videos. You will be surprised by other beautiful and transformative stories. Until the next video,